right. There's a few more of us who used to be athletes. Well, like most kids growing up, I wanted to be good at sports. And I was terrible. If you're familiar with the American sport baseball, when you start out in baseball, they put the ball on a tee so that there's no pitching, so that you can learn to hit the ball. I struck out playing t-ball. And after one baseball game, I was just frustrated. And I walked up to my dad and I said, "Dad, I want to run home." And my dad looked at me with this weird look and he goes, "You want to run home?" I go, "Yeah, I just want to be by myself. I want to run home. I'm just not happy right now." Now, we lived in a very small town in central Indiana in the United States, 300 people. One of those towns where everybody knows everybody. Some of you may have grown up in communities like that. Everybody knows everybody's business. And we lived about 5 kilometers from the baseball field to my home. And for some strange reason, my dad goes, "Sure, go ahead, run home." And he got in his car and he went home. And so I took off running. I eventually made it home and I came through the front door and my dad put down his newspaper and he looked at his watch. "Matt, who picked you up?" I'm like, "Nobody, I ran home." He's like, "Matt, I think we found your sport." So I got into running. Any runners here? That feeling of being out on the road, the wind and the sun, that feeling of being completely exhausted, but fulfilled at the same time. Endurance sports can do that for you. Finally came the day for my first 5K race, and I was ready. It's up on the starter line. The starter raised her pistol in the air, and we took off. And I felt amazing. Some of you may remember that American television show from the 70s, the $6 Million Man, and that's when I realized that that's how fast I was actually running, because all of the boys were passing me. And then all of the girls. Out of 173 runners who finished the race that day, I finished 173rd. I was defeated, demoralized, dejected. And I walked up to my dad and said, "Dad, obviously sports is not for me. I quit." And my dad said the strangest thing. Meltem, you may have heard from somebody, quitters never win and winners never quit. Or your parents may have told you, you can't quit. You made a commitment. No, my dad looked at me and says, "Matt, you can't quit. Your team needs you." What? Dad, I couldn't even see the short little girl who finished in front of me. Nobody cares that I was here today. No one's going to care if I don't show up tomorrow. I'm done. And my dad just he chuckled at me, and in his own special way, he goes, "Well, Matt, you're wrong, because that little girl feels a whole lot better today because at least she beat you." Thanks, Dad. But more importantly, when you go back tomorrow, and you will, no one else has an excuse to quit. Your team needs you. I did go back the next day, and I eventually became a very good runner. But that's not why I'm sharing this story with you. See, I've thought about that lesson my dad tried to give me at that point. I think as we get older, we actually really think about the things our parents tried to instill in us. And I think what he was saying is that leadership at its core is nothing more than influence. It's the ability through our thoughts and actions to change the thoughts and actions and perhaps the words of others around us. And hopefully for the better. Hopefully in a situation that uplifts people rather than divides or puts people down. But I think that's at the core of leadership. And it's more that you can have the ability to do that. You can have the skills and the networks to do that. But if you don't actually do something, you're not exercising leadership. So at its core, I think leadership is really exercising your influence. And I hope that's in a positive and supportive way. I hope that that is working towards a worthwhile goal, that it is having a set of values, and that it's leading people and not managing things. But that's kind of the way I look at leadership. And so what I'm going to do for the rest of this time is I'm just going to share some thoughts on leadership with you that I've come through over my years, and especially as we're in uncertain times. I know Turkey has had incredible levels of inflation over the last few years. I mean, it's down to 40%. Okay, down to 40%. That's scary for me, understanding the impact that that has on people. I know you just went through a contentious election, and now you've got, the impacts from that. You've had a horrible earthquake in Turkey that has impacted millions of people, whether they were directly involved or not. And so there's a lot of uncertainty for Turkey and for the world, let alone just coming out of a global pandemic. Now, the good news is that in 2022, you had the fastest growing economy of any G20 country in the world at over 20%. So there are positive things happening. But our ability to forecast the future is what I think has been most impacted during this last 3 to 4 years. And why do I say that? See, as leaders, one of the things we like to do is leaders tend to become strategic. Okay, I think the best leaders try to take a long-term view and ask, why are we doing this, and what's the long-term outcome? Where are we headed? The vision, the direction that we're headed. And that requires the ability to forecast into the future. Now, I work in technology, as was said during the introduction, and we've had Moore's Law for the past 30 plus years. It says computing is going to double every 18 to 20 months. The amount of computer power that we have, that's been challenged over the last few years due to physics and the limitations of computer chips. But we've continued to make computing better. And so we've been able to forecast there. But we have global wars, we have economic crises in many countries around the world. And our ability to predict what's going to happen has been shortened. And we can't plan 3 years, 5 years out. We can hope 3 years and 5 years out. But that's why the board of directors of Toastmasters has moved to 2-year strategic plans. When I grew up, a 2-year plan was a tactical plan. But today, with the amount of change, we view that as a strategic plan, because that's as far as we're comfortable trying to forecast out. So one of the tips that I would share with you is respond, don't react. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I worked as a lifeguard. I don't know what the equivalent word in Turkish would be, but I worked at a beach, sitting up on a chair, watching the swimmers and making sure that people were safe, and that if anybody was in trouble, they got help. And during training, one of the things that they told us was that the most dangerous thing you can do as a lifeguard is to get into the water to save somebody, or to attempt to save somebody. Because if you actually get in the water, your chance of saving them goes down 80%. And your chance of dying in the attempt to save them goes up almost 1,000 times. If you stay out of the water, your chances of dying are almost nil. And so what's the first reaction that people have? They see somebody struggling in the water, and their first reaction is to get in the water, swim to them, give them a hand, and pull them out. But no, we have tools to do that as a lifeguard. We have buoys. We have flotation devices. In a large lake, you might have boats or jet skis in the ocean in order to get to people and stay safe. And you never, unless it's absolutely essential, you never put your hands on the person. Okay, you might flip them over to get their head out of the water, but that's about it. And you do that very carefully, because if you have to tow somebody in by hand, and they do this to you in training, you simulate a rescue, and you have to grab the person and flip it over, and the person, the minute that they get air to their face again, they will freak out. They will start kicking and hitting and kneeling, everything in order to try to save themselves. And they don't care about you. They're just trying to save themselves. In IT, I'm an IT cybersecurity expert, and we know what's going on with cybersecurity, ransomware, cyber criminals, emails, filtering everything that goes through. And we have to keep the same thing in mind. When there's an attack, the first instinct is to pull the plug, right? But if I pull the plug, then I don't have any evidence of what they've done, what access they've gotten, and anything that they've done. So I actually have to respond and go through my checklist to make sure I do things in the correct order. So one of the lessons when you're in times of uncertainty is to think through your response. And one of the ways to do that is to plan ahead. We call them tabletop exercises in IT. Some people call it scenario planning, but it's basically, okay, and what if this goes wrong? And then you think through it and you ask questions. And then you say, okay, so if we have a fire, what are we going to, anyone, I don't know, in Turkey, in the US, companies have to do fire drills. Do you have to do that in Turkey, in your office place? Okay, the fire department comes and they time you to see how long it takes you to get out of the building, right? All right, and you're in a geologically unstable area, so you might have to do earthquake drills too. So you know where the earthquake zones are in the building, they're the safest places, and you know where you're supposed to gather. Do this in all aspects of your leadership. Ask those what if questions. We're doing that on the board of directors right now. What if this happens? What are we going to do? What if this happens? What's going to be the response? So we're not in a position where we need to react. So that's the first thing I would want to share with you. Respond, don't react. Now, as mentioned in my introduction, I'm an amateur cyclist. I've been on a bicycle for more than 40 years, more than 400,000 kilometers in my lifetime. All right, I see somebody's giving a thumbs up. I'm guessing he's a fellow cyclist. All right, and my favorite time of the year is coming up. All right, in just a few weeks, we're going to have the Tour de France, and that will be on my TV. Every hour it's available for those 3 weeks, because I love that. And I participated in racing, and I've participated as a member. Well, early in my racing career, I went up to my coach one day before the race. I'm like, and this guy's name was Dave. He was the coach and our team manager, and he was from California. And if you've ever seen a California Surfer movie, I mean, he was like right out of that. He'd be like, yo, dude, what's up? Like that. That's the way he talked. So I'm like, so Dave, man, what's the plan today? He's like, Matt, I got good news for you. You're the man today. He goes, what I need you to do is be the lead out man. And I'm like, okay, now I knew what that was, but for some reason he decided he needed to tell me anyway. He goes, so when we got about 1 kilometer to go, I need you to be up right in front, right in the middle, and I'm going to be right on your tail. He goes, I need you to go as hard as you can. And then with about, 400 meters or so to go, just kind of ease off so I can go out and try to win the race. And I'm like, got it. So we take off on the race. It was about a 100-kilometer race. So we're about a little over 2 hours in, and we're coming up on the fin. So I get in position. We got 1 kilometer to go, and I'm exactly where Dave wanted me to be. I was right in the middle. Dave was maybe 1.5 centimeters off of my rear tail, exactly where we need to be. 700 meters to go, we're in good shape. 500 meters to go, in good shape. And then I see, out of the corner of my eye, the most gorgeous woman I have ever seen in my life. And I looked. And the next thing I knew, I was picking myself up off the ground, along with the other 30 bicyclists that I took out by causing a crash. And afterwards, after we got back to the team bus, Dave, well, as you can imagine, Dave wasn't real happy with me, and he was looking for me, and he found me. And he's like, and I'll be polite because he was a little more forceful. He's like, "Matt, what the happened?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I was in good position. I went down." He's like, "Matt, you got distracted, didn't you?" And I had to go, "Well, yeah, I did." And after a moment, he goes, "I just got one question for you, Matt. Was she worth it?" Now, in reality, here is somebody I saw out of the corner of my eye for less than a second. I don't know her name. I've never spoken to her. I've never seen her again in my life. But my distraction not only took me out of action, it took my entire team and 3 other teams out of action. In times of uncertainty, what is your guiding principle as a leader? What is your focus? I had a focus that day. I was supposed to be there until 400 meters to go. And at the last moment, with less than 100 meters before I'm supposed to pull off, I got distracted. I lost the focus on my mission for the day. What about you as leaders? What is your mission? So for club officers, whether you're the current team that's finishing out this year or the team that's about to come in next year, your mission is the club mission. That is the focus, to provide a positive and supportive learning experience in which members are empowered to develop communication leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth. You need to take a look at that mission and understand that that's the only thing that matters in your club. If you're not meeting the mission, the other elements don't matter. That's the first thing you need to do. At the district, if some of you are district leaders, it's the district mission. At Toastmasters International, it's Toastmasters International's mission to empower people to become more effective communicators and leaders. That's what drives the board of directors through clubs, through districts, and through other programs that we have to offer, such as Speechcraft, which I heard mentioned earlier today. So think about that as you're doing that. Now, if you're leading another organization, your organization has a mission. That's the focus as a leader. And the one thing that I was told more than any other when I moved into the position of international president from our past international presidents was to avoid distractions. And I think this is what they were trying to tell me, is stay focused on your mission and keep it central. Our CEO says, keep the main thing, the main thing. And if you keep the main thing, which is the mission, everything else will fall into place. So that's the second lesson. Stay focused on the mission. If you stay focused on the mission, what matters to the mission, even in times of uncertainty and doubt, you will do well. But I think the most important lesson is about people. So several years ago, I was attending a conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. And at lunch, the MC came up and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, over lunch today, we want you to go out on the streets of Scottsdale, Arizona, find a stranger, take them to lunch, and tell us about it." Now, I don't know how well that would have worked in Turkey, but for me, it was not going well. I'd walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, will you go to lunch with me?" And they were like, "Yeah, no, and they'd run off. And I am a get her done kind of guy. If you give me a task, I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to do it extremely well to the best of my ability. Who's like me? Who loves checklists? And at the end of the day, that checklist got done, Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm like that. I see a couple people. Checklists are awesome tools. All right. And so I'm sitting, I get frustrated. And I sit down on this bench and I'm like, I'm going to be the only person in this room who failed at this. And frankly, that is not acceptable. Okay. And as I'm thinking, I'm hearing this voice in my back of my head, but I'm trying to ignore it. But then I realized it was my mother's voice. And one thing I know growing up, you better listen to your mother, right? You better listen to your mother. And what I heard her say was, Matt, in whatever you do, find the purpose. Well, that's a really interesting concept. I mean, I know Simon Sinek says, find your why and then go out and do, and many other leaders do that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But she was telling me exactly the opposite. She's like, you're doing something. Why are you doing it? What is the greater purpose in what you're doing? And so I decided at that moment, you know what, I want to thank a veteran for his service. And I pictured an older gentleman. And, I was specifically thinking of somebody who served back in World War II, in the greatest generation. And so I pictured an older gentleman with white, thin hair, very wise face, kind of like Hassan there, very wise face, a little thinning on top. I saw a ball cap and a cane, and the word Arizona flipped across my head, but I was in Arizona. And I stood up and I went around the corner, and Shamil, he was right in front of me. The exact gentleman I had pictured. Maybe a little bit better looking than Hassan, maybe, I'm not sure. But a thin hair, a wise face, a cane, and a ball cap that said USS Arizona. And I walked up to him and I said, would you do the honor of going to lunch with me? And he looked at me for a second. He said, why? Well, this is a good start. He's not running away. And I said, well, I noticed your cap. I made a decision a few minutes ago. I wanted to thank a veteran for his service. And, would you go into the restaurant and have lunch for me? And he looked at me and he goes, well, my mother told me never turn down a free lunch. And like I said earlier, you better listen to your mother. So we went inside, we ordered our food, started talking, and eventually the waiter brought the bill. Eventually the waiter came around, got our food over, and I eventually asked him, I said, Bill, I noticed your ball cap. Did you know somebody on the Arizona? He goes, know somebody? Boy, I was on the Arizona. So I will never forget that day. It was early morning around assembly time, and I heard the air raid sirens go off. And my first thought was, oh man, another drill. But then I realized that everybody was pointing out across the horizon. And they weren't our boys. The next minutes felt like hours, days, and seconds at the same time as there were torpedoes in the water, bombs fell, bullets were flying, the stack behind me blew up, and I was thrown into the waters. And as I tried to keep my head above the waves, I watched my ship sink to the bottom of Pearl Harbor. I lost 2,300 brothers that day. I will never forget it. Finally, the silence was broken by who else? The waiter, as he brought the check over. He laid it down on the table. I picked it up, started to pull it back to me, and it was snatched out of my hands. And I looked up, and Bill had it. And I said, Bill, I told you I wanted to take you to lunch. He goes, yeah, I know what you said. So what? The only thing I could think to say at that moment was, well, my mother also told me never turn down a free lunch. Now, see, I almost missed that incredible experience because I didn't understand the assignment. See, I thought the assignment was to get out and get outside of your comfort zone. I thought the assignment was to be able to check off something on a list of things I needed to do for this seminar. No, the assignment was to connect with another human being, if just for a few minutes. And I not only got to connect with somebody, I gave somebody the opportunity to share their story. And I have a new appreciation for a historical event that I had only read about in history books and that I'd only seen documentaries on and bad Hollywood movies. But I had a new appreciation for that. How many times have I done that before? Do I still do that at times? Probably. I try not to. See, as a leader, there are times where you need to lead with your head. You need to think and plan, and we talked about that a little bit, but having contingency plans and strategic plans and focusing on goals and creating goals that you can strive towards. And that's very important as a leader. You need to be able to do that. There are times where you need to lead with your hands. Okay, when the earthquake happened in Turkey, what did we need? We needed people picking up rubble and finding those who were possibly still alive. We needed people cleaning up and showing their leadership through acts of service. And that's important as a leader. You have to set the example for your team. And you have to be willing to do the same type of work that they are if that's necessary. But with a team, you've got to start with your heart. See, leadership more than anything else, especially in times of uncertainty, is about people. It is an exercise in human relationship. And so if you start with your heart, if you focus on the connections in your team, if you focus on the emotional and mental well-being of those in your team, when the tough times come, when the uncertainty comes, when the doubt comes, you have that relationship to fall back on because you know that in the team you care about each other in the aspect of getting the mission done. And if you do that as a leader, you will never be wrong. You may make bad decisions. You may make suboptimal decisions, but you'll never be wrong because you're putting people first. In times of uncertainty, in times of doubt, if you put people first, you will always win. So those are just 3 of the lessons I wanted to share with you today about leading times of uncertainty and doubt. And what it boils down to is putting people first. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Matt, for sharing your experience with us. It's really an honor, so valuable. Thank you. And now it is the questionnaire part. And now I'm going to give the word to Özge Gencay and Ece Özdemir to run this session. Özge, are you here?
Sercan, hi, Matt and everyone. And first question, comes from our attendees and asking that, I love your saying that keep the main thing, and focus on mission.
Mm-hmm.
Improve leadership skills and communication skills, but most clubs focus on how they need to achieve DCP points and how they can perform better than other clubs. They forget the core Toastmaster mission of leadership and communication skills. Please, your opinion about that.
The Distinguished Club program is the best measure we have today for how effective a club is at meeting its mission. Okay, we can speculate about things that might be better. And the board does that from time to time. We say, how can we improve it? And we've seen changes, including this year. We saw some changes in the Distinguished Club program. And those are positive. Those are good things that we continue to modify the program to meet the current needs of the organization. But it's the best measure of the effectiveness of a club in meeting the mission. And so I look at distinguished clubs, they are not the goal. Being a distinguished club is not a goal. What the goal is to do the activities that result in a distinguished club. Okay, and then there's a little subtle difference there. So behind every point in the Distinguished Club program is a person achieving goals. Now let's think about that. So let's talk about the points. We have 6 points for educational achievements, right? There's 6 points. The first 6 points are about educational achievement. Well, most people get that. That's about members meeting their goals. So by encouraging members to meet their goals, that also helps the club. But the goal was the member reaching their goal, and the club got credit for helping them do that. Now, the other 4 points are more administrative, okay, and more about growth of the club. So let's take a look about adding new members. Why do we want to add new members? Well, the average club is going to lose 7 to 8, average club of 20 is going to lose 7 to 8 members a year. That's just what our statistics say. So where do you think we came up with 8 new members a year? In order to maintain your charter strength of 20. Okay, so that's why we want clubs to add 4 members and then 4 more members. Also, I've been in some small clubs of 8, 10 members. All right, I have a member in my club. We've been members of this club together for 8 years. I love her. She's going to be our next district director. But I do not need to hear her evaluate my speech again. I need other perspectives. Okay, and she doesn't really want to evaluate my speech again. Okay, I want to hear different perspectives, and I need to hear different perspectives to hear different voices who might say the same thing a little differently, and it'll land on me differently, and I'll actually hear it that time. All right, getting paperwork turned in on time, that's really important. I mean, who wants to belong to a club that's full of chaos? Or do you want to belong to a club that's run efficiently? I don't know about you. I'd prefer to belong to a club that's run efficiently. So that's in my best interest as a member for the club to be efficient and effective in the way it conducts its business. And then the last part is training. Okay, we need to have officers trained so that they understand what their roles are, their responsibilities are, and they are learning transferable skills by going to that training. Skills that they can use in their office, that they can use in another community organization, that they can use in an NGO, that they can use on governments. We have many Toastmasters who've gone into city government, state government, and national governments, including the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, who's a distinguished Toastmaster, and the Deputy Prime Minister as well. So that would be my response, is you focus on the people, focus on their goals, but know that it's a measurement, it's a result, and it does tell us something about the clubs. And I usually, if I go into a club and I see they're distinguished, I almost always have a good experience. And that's really what it comes down to, is the experience that the members have. So I would focus first on moments of truth and look at that, because that tells you what goes into it. And just remember that the Distinguished Club program is an outcome. In my opinion, it's not a goal, it's an outcome.
Thank you very much. Ece?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the first question from my side, maybe it's already covered, but our attendees are wondering, what is your leadership style and why?
My leadership style, I think, could best be described. So my communication style, in case you haven't picked it up yet, is direct. Okay, if you haven't picked it up yet, you will see it. I tend to be a direct communicator. That's what's been most effective for me. And I'm aware there's some downsides to it, and I keep those in mind and I modify when necessary, but my preference is to be a direct communicator. My leadership style is fluid, and I think the best way to describe it would be situational leadership. What does this situation call for? If there's times of crisis, when the Twin Towers were attacked 22 years ago, that was not a time for leaders in the upper stories to say, okay, well, how do you feel about us going downstairs and getting out of this building after it's been hit by a plane? No, that was a time where leaders said, move. Okay, we're going, and if you're not coming with us, we're going to leave you behind. That was what was needed in that moment. In the time of the earthquake, in the immediate aftermath, that was a time where people needed to take direct leadership to try to save lives. It wasn't a time for votes and democracy and everything else. It was time for a more authoritarian, not a dictator, but a more authoritarian leadership style. And militaries plan democratically, then they execute in a more authoritarian structure. Okay, now that doesn't work in Toastmasters. That's not our structure in Toastmasters. And let's face it, there are very few crises in Toastmasters that require an immediate response. So we generally have time to talk through things, make a decision, and work together to come up with the best outcome. And so that's what I try to do. And the board is very collaborative. So the board the executive committee hears my opinion, but the board of directors rarely hears my opinion. Okay, because the executive committee has met. We may or may not have a recommendation for the board to consider. And the board's going to discuss it. And the minute I speak up, it creates the potential of people trying to align themselves with me or against me. And I'd rather hear their perspective unfiltered without knowing what mine is. So I might express my opinion at the very end. Okay, but I don't want to influence the discussion as the international president. I want to keep the discussion on track and stay in the guardrails. So that's become my style. But my natural tendency is to jump in early. So, but I tend to look at each opportunity. And I'd say the biggest thing I would say with my leadership style is I start with the heart, then I go to the head, and then I go to the hands. And that's the way I kind of work it. I'm going to start with the heart and think about people, think about the impact. Then I start planning, and then I go to the hands and start doing.
Yes. Now our third question is, what is the difference between leaders and professionals?
So that's a lot to unpack in a single question. A professional does not have to be a leader. So let's take a look at the world's most popular sport. What we say in the US, we call soccer. The rest of the world knows as it football. Okay, so I just so you know, if I say football, I'm not talking about American football, although I love American football. For this purpose, I'm talking about football. Okay, football that's a professional sport. Not all of the members on that team are leaders. Some of them are followers, some of them are role players, but they have been elevated because of their skill set, because of their skill set to a professional leader, professional position. Some people are elevated to a professional because of their education, because of their experience, because of the skills that they possess. So professional, in one way of looking at it, means you've achieved a certain level of skill, and you can say you operate as a professional rather than an amateur. So I think that's the way I tend to look at it. It's more based on skills. Leadership is more about people and how you manage teams. Now, you have people who are professional in their leadership skills, okay, and who are leadership professionals. But I think somebody posted, it just flashed by me that, professional is a title. like doctor is a title, like Your Honor is a title. Those are based upon a position, based upon a skill set, based upon achieving some educational level, based upon passing some exam, and you can call yourself a professional. In order to be a leader, it really comes down to, are you using your influence, like I said earlier, are you using your influence to change the hearts and minds and actions of other people towards a positive end in a positive way, and using values and starting with your heart? That's the way I define leadership. They're not exclusive. People can be professional and leaders. People can be leaders who aren't professionals. Okay, so, but they're independent of each other. I think that's the best way to answer that. Looks like we have time for probably one more question to keep you guys on schedule, but you tell me, I'll go until you tell me to stop.
Okay, so I hope this one will be a quick one. So what are the most important lessons you learned during your leadership? I think you also mentioned in your speech, but maybe you can summarize. You can give us a summary.
Well, I gave you 3 of those lessons. I think the most important lesson overall is leaders are most effective, in my experience, when they are authentic. Okay, I say that your authenticity is your greatest commodity, your greatest currency, when you're authentic. When I ran for the board in 2014, what I heard from individuals afterwards, and I wasn't successful in 2014, was, Matt, yeah, you're a smart guy. Yeah, you've got great ideas, but who are you? They didn't know who I was inside, because I had created barriers and kept people out. And so that's been my greatest lesson, is to reduce the thickness of that barrier. Now, we all need barriers, even from our spouses. There are things that are just our deepest core that we're not comfortable sharing. And maybe we'd be better sharing that, but there's psychologists say you need some level of that private space that's just deeply yours. Okay, but the more you can thin that out, and the more you can let people in an appropriate way, and yes, your spouse, your children, your brothers and sisters, your parents are going to see more of you than people at work. Okay, and they're going to see more of you because of the time they spend with you than maybe people in your Toastmasters club, unless you develop a significant friendship outside of that. But the more you can let people see who you are, the more effective you're going to be as a leader. And as a corollary to that, get rid of the need to be right. And that was a huge need for me. And some of you are nodding your head, so you know what I'm talking about. It's not just that you want to be right, you have to be right. And if you're right, it's not, if you're not right, it's not acceptable. And I've gotten past that. I'm okay. I don't like it. But if somebody comes up with a better idea than me, I'm glad to jump on it. If somebody corrects some information that I've got, I'm going to learn from it and move forward. And I think if you can do those 2 things, if you can be self-aware and let people see who you truly are, and then you can be open to being corrected and not feeling psychologically damaged because someone's got a better idea, somebody's smarter than you. Let's be honest, other than one person in the world who we're not sure who that is, there's always somebody smarter than you. Okay, always, other than one person in the world. All right. And so you're going to run into people who are smarter, more accomplished, more experienced than you. Learn from them, and don't let that damage your own sense of who you are, because there are areas where you know more than they do. And so just be yourself, allow yourself to shine in your space, and don't suffer from comparison with others.
And the last question is, what do you think? How a leader can assess his own success. In other words, what are the success criteria of a leader?
The success criteria, I think, are based on the mission. So I don't want to I don't want to confuse anyone. One measure of success in a Toastmasters club is the Distinguished Club program. It's not the only measure of success, but it is one measure of success. One measure of success in the district is the district recognition program. Okay, one measure of success in Toastmasters at the international level is how many districts achieved distinguished status and how many clubs achieved distinguished status and how many membership, did our membership grow or sink? Those are measures of success. But the real measure of success is in lives changed through Toastmasters. Okay, so every time, how many of you feel that your life is better today because of your experience in Toastmasters? Go ahead, raise your hand. Okay, you are all successes from my perspective at the board of directors, because our program helped you improve your condition in your life, helped you reach goals, and some of you may still be working towards goals, okay? And so that is a very important measure of success. I think the important thing is when you start a project, define what those measures of success are going to be. So we recently talked about a project at the board of directors to help build more clubs around the world. All right. Our measure of success is how many more clubs do we build? That's a very simple measure of success, but we know that going in. So that's what I would say is when you try to redefine your measure of success halfway through the year, that's when people begin to question if this really it is. So at the beginning of the year, Distinguished Club Program is one of your measures of success, but your club success plan at your club that you should be working on with your new officers this month and next month, and then share that with the rest of the club. That is also going to define other successes and other ways to measure success. So look at it holistically, but those measurements are important. So I don't want anyone to get confused. They are an important measurement. They tell us something about your club, but there are also other measures of success to look at.
We are done. Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, team, for those questions. And again, I'd like to thank Matt. And on behalf of everyone, I'd like to share our certification with you. Here is, you see it? Yeah, because Turan Tanin couldn't attend the meeting today. I'm going to share it on behalf of him and everyone in Turkey. We really appreciate that you are here. You shared your valuable experiences, ideas with us. Really, it helps us to grow a lot in this community. Really appreciate it for it. Thank you, Matt. Now I'm going to stop sharing and we are going to move on the agenda. But before we move on, would you like to have 5 minutes break? Meltem, I'm looking at you.
Group photo.
Ercan, yes.
Ercan.
Yes, thank you for reminding Mustafa. Okay, we are going to have a group photo with the certification as well, right? Just a second.
And everyone.
Mustafa, could you please again say? Okay. I think we are done about the first part. And now we are going to move on the agenda. We will have a prepared speaker part, table topic, evaluation part. Before we move on, let's have a break for 3 minutes. Is it okay for everyone?
Yes.
Again, 20:30 Turkish time, 20:30, we are going to again meet here. Yeah, Meltem, would you like to say something? I heard your voice.
Thank you so much to our international president and all role holders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. I do have another meeting
in
to
Istanbul,
attend.
one of our meetings in Toastmasters
will try.
meetings.
I will certainly try to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.